Billionaire sees girl repairing cars barefoot and faints when he sees his late brother's ring. The son was a cruel overseer that afternoon, beating down relentlessly on the Arizona highway. Peter Lancaster, 37 and billionaire CEO of Lancaster Motors, cursed softly as he kicked the tire of his black luxury sedan, which had just sputtered to a humiliating stop. No cell service, no assistant, and certainly no chauffeur out here. Just dust, heat, and a broken engine. His perfectly tailored suit stuck to his back as he glanced up and down the endless stretch of road. Then he spotted it, a crooked wooden sign half hidden by weeds that read, "Manny's Auto, Repairs and Parts." It pointed to a gravel path leading into a patch of old trees. With no better options, Peter followed it. The path opened onto a clearing with a tin-roofed garage that had clearly seen better decades. Rusted car frames littered the yard like forgotten skeletons. He was about to call out when he heard it, the sharp clang of a wrench falling, followed by a small grunt. He turned the corner and stopped cold. There, crouched beneath the hood of an old Ford pickup, was a girl, no older than 8. Barefoot, her jeans torn at the knees, her curly brown hair tied messily in a bandana. She had grease on her cheeks and arms, and her tiny hands moved confidently over the engine like a seasoned mechanic. Peter blinked. "Excuse me?" The girl didn't startle. She barely looked at him. "You broke down?" she asked, her voice calm and practical. He nodded, bewildered. "Yes, but is your father here?" She reached under the hood, tightened something with a click. "He's gone. I do the fixing now." Peter opened his mouth, closed it, then crouched slightly to see her better. "You fix cars?" "Yup," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. "Show me what's wrong." Still in shock, Peter gestured toward the road. "My sedan's back there. Engine just died." "But look, are you here alone?" She finally looked at him properly, and Peter felt something strange in his chest. Her eyes, deep brown, intense, too old for her age, familiar somehow. She stood up and grabbed a rag from a nearby stool. "I'll get my tools." Peter followed her in a daze, unsure if this was a fever dream. She moved with the confidence of someone who had done this 100 times, her bare feet barely making a sound on the gravel. As she bent to pick up her wrench kit, something glinted around her neck. Peter squinted. A silver ring hung from a thin cord resting just below her collarbone. His breath caught in his throat. The shape, the crest engraved on its face. It was unmistakable. It was his brother Daniel's ring, the same ring that had been buried with him 10 years ago. Peter stumbled backward, his vision narrowing, air leaving his lungs in a sudden rush. And then, everything went black. Peter came to lying flat on the dusty garage floor, the sharp scent of motor oil in his nose. His head throbbed, and for a moment, he wasn't sure where he was. The low whirring of a fan, the chirp of cicadas outside, and the faint sound of metal clinking slowly brought him back. Then the memory hit him like a freight train. The ring, Daniel's ring. He sat up too fast and winced, clutching his temple. "Don't move too quick," the girl said, her voice calm again. She was sitting on a stool beside him, a small bottle of water in her hand. "You fainted." Peter looked at her, dazed. "The ring," he whispered. She blinked, then instinctively touched the necklace tucked beneath her shirt. Her expression hardened slightly. "It was my dad's." Peter's throat tightened. "Your dad? Where did he get it?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she handed him the water. "You need to drink." He took the bottle, hands trembling slightly. The air around them felt heavy, charged with something unspoken. "Your name," he said slowly. "What's your name?" "Marta," she replied. "Marta Rivera." Rivera. That didn't help. His brother's name had been Daniel Lancaster. He'd died in a car crash a decade ago. The body had been badly burned. Only the ring had helped identify him. And now, it was here, with this girl. Peter's mind raced. Could Daniel have survived somehow? Had there been a mistake? Or, no, impossible. The grave, the DNA, He stood shakily. "How old are you, Marta?" She looked suspicious. 8. He did the math. Daniel died 10 years ago. Peter's breath caught again. He knelt beside her, trying not to frighten her. "Marta, tell me about your dad, please." She shrugged, looking down at her greasy hands. "He fixed cars. He taught me. He died 2 years ago." Peter's eyes locked on hers. "Do you have a picture?" She hesitated, then reached into a drawer beside the workbench and pulled out a small, folded photo. It was worn and creased like it had been handled 100 times. Peter took it, hands shaking. He unfolded it, and there he was, Daniel, smiling, standing beside a younger version of Marta in front of this very garage. Same wavy hair, same warm grin. Peter couldn't breathe. This is my brother," he said, voice cracking. "This is Daniel Lancaster." Marta narrowed her eyes. "No, that's my dad, Daniel Rivera." Peter's heart thundered in his chest. Could it be? Had Daniel changed his name, disappeared, started a new life? Why? He stared at the photo again, as memories of their childhood flooded his mind. Growing up together, sharing dreams, building toy engines in their parents' basement. Daniel had loved machines, and now this girl. His niece? Suddenly a voice echoed from the trees outside, gruff, angry. "Marta, where are you?" She froze, her eyes filled with something Peter hadn't seen yet. Fear. The voice came again, louder this time. "Marta, I said get your little butt out here now." Peter stood protectively in front of the girl, instinct kicking in. "Who is that?" Marta's expression shut down. "My uncle," she muttered. "He lets me stay here. I fix cars so he doesn't send me away." Peter's jaw tightened. The tone of that voice had been all too familiar, control wrapped in menace. He'd grown up with men like that, lurking around his father's business empire. Footsteps crunched over gravel, drawing closer. Then a man stepped into view, broad-shouldered, sunburned skin, his grey tank top stained with oil and sweat. His eyes locked on Peter with suspicion, but there was something calculating in them too. "What's this?" the man growled, nodding toward Peter. "You bothering my niece?" Peter straightened, slipping into the commanding posture that came naturally in boardrooms. "I broke down. She was helping." The man's eyes flicked to Marta, who stood behind Peter, her arms crossed tightly. "She's not supposed to talk to strangers." Peter smiled politely, but his eyes were steel. "She's quite capable. Saved me a tow bill." The man didn't smile back. Instead, he stepped closer to Marta. "Go inside, now." She hesitated. "Marta," he said, voice low but laced with threat. Peter's hand twitched at his side. Marta looked up at him, then slowly backed away, disappearing into the dim shadows of the garage. Once she was gone, the man turned to Peter again. "Whatever you think you saw here, forget it. She ain't your concern." Peter folded his arms. "I think she might be." The man laughed once, dry and cold. "What? You gonna adopt her now, Mr. Fancy Suit?" Peter didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "How did she get that ring?" The man's eyes narrowed. "What ring?" Peter took a slow step forward. "The one she wears around her neck. The one that belonged to my dead brother." The man's expression flickered, only for a second, but it was enough. Peter saw the truth in that moment. This man knew exactly who Daniel had been. He knew more than he was saying. She said her father's name was Daniel Rivera, that he died 2 years ago. Funny thing is, my brother Daniel Lancaster died 10 years ago, or so I thought. The man's smile vanished. "You need to leave," he said flatly. Peter held his ground. "Not until I get answers." The man's jaw clenched. He stepped even closer, his voice a whisper now. "You think showing up here gives you the right to dig up ghosts? That girl's finally got peace. Don't take it from her." Peter's voice dropped too. Peace or silence? Their eyes locked, a storm brewing between them. Behind them, in the shadows of the garage, Marta pressed her ear to the wooden wall, listening, eyes wide. And as Peter turned to leave, the man said one last thing, low and deliberate. "Some truths bury better than the dead." Peter drove back to the highway in silence, the photo of Daniel and Marta resting in the passenger seat beside him, like a ticking bomb. His luxury sedan, once a symbol of status, now felt like a prison. Every hum of the engine was a reminder of what he'd just witnessed, a child fixing cars barefoot, with a ring around her neck that should have been buried with his brother. He didn't return to the city. Not yet. Instead, he checked into a small roadside motel 3 miles away, his thoughts spiraling. Marta's face, her eyes, that voice that held both strength and sadness, and that man, her uncle. Something was deeply wrong. At dawn the next day, Peter sat on the motel's bed, laptop open, digging through archives, obituaries, and property records. It didn't take long to find it. Daniel Rivera, registered mechanic, died in a fire, small blaze that destroyed part of the garage 2 years ago. No major investigation, cause listed as accidental. But something else caught Peter's eye, the property deed. The garage had been purchased under the name Daniel Rivera 10 years ago, right after his real brother had supposedly died in the crash. It had been transferred to a man named Carl Watson after Daniel's death. Carl Watson, Marta's uncle. Peter stared at the screen. You took his name. You took his life. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It rang once. "Peter?" came a woman's voice, hesitant. "Angela," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need your help. It's about Daniel." A pause. "Daniel's dead," she said. "I thought so too," Peter replied, "but I found his daughter." The silence on the line deepened. "I need you to come," he said. "There's more. A man named Carl Watson has custody. Something's wrong. I can feel it." Angela exhaled. "Send me the address." He did. That afternoon, Peter returned to the garage, but stayed hidden. He parked far down the road, watching through binoculars. Marta was outside working on a red sedan, her face smeared with grease, lips pursed in focus. Then Carl came out, shouting something. Marta flinched, dropped her wrench. Peter's blood boiled, but this time he had a plan. Back at the motel, he began drafting a legal motion. He knew the best attorneys in the state. He would get answers, and he would protect her. The next morning, Peter waited in his car near the diner across the road. Marta was there picking up groceries. She walked barefoot again, carrying a small cloth bag, her frame tiny against the hot asphalt. Peter stepped out, walking up slowly. "Marta." She turned, startled. "You're back." He crouched beside her. "I had to be. Listen, can I show you something?" From his pocket, he pulled a photo she'd never seen. Daniel, much younger, beside Peter in a tuxedo, arms around each other, laughing. Her eyes widened, her fingers trembled. "This is my dad." Peter nodded. "He was my brother." She stared at the photo, then whispered, "Why did he lie to me?" Peter swallowed hard. "I don't know, but I think someone else is lying too." She looked up at him, and for the first time she whispered, "Help me." Peter didn't hesitate. He gently took Marta's small hand in his and led her across the street to his car. He opened the door for her like she was royalty, helping her inside as if every step could shatter her. As they drove away, Peter glanced at her through the rearview mirror. She held the photo of Daniel tightly, her fingers tracing the edges. "I want to know everything," she said softly. "About him. About you. About why I've been alone." Peter nodded, blinking away the sudden sting in his eyes. "You deserve all of that, Marta. And I promise, I'll give you everything I can." They drove to a nearby park where Peter had arranged to meet Angela. Marta sat quietly beside him on a bench, her eyes scanning the open field ahead. When Angela finally approached, Marta tilted her head curiously. Angela was in her 40s, elegantly dressed, but with a warmth in her gaze that melted some of Marta's defenses. She crouched down in front of her, eyes brimming with tears. "You look just like him," she whispered. Marta blinked. "Did you know my dad?" Angela nodded. "Very well. He was my best friend, once." Peter watched the exchange, his thoughts racing. He didn't have all the answers yet, but now he had allies. Later that night, Peter made one more stop, alone. He returned to the garage, parking down the road again. The place was quiet, no lights, no sign of Carl. He stepped closer, slipping through a side door. The air inside was heavy with oil and rust. He moved past the tool benches, searching for anything that could explain the past 10 years. Then he saw it, a box tucked behind an old tire stack. He pulled it out and opened it. Inside were photos, letters, and documents, a journal, receipts with the name Daniel Rivera. But then, at the bottom, a sealed envelope with Peter's name scrawled across it in Daniel's handwriting. His breath caught. He opened it with shaking fingers. "Peter, if you're reading this, then somehow you found me, or found her. Marta." The words blurred through Peter's tears. "I'm sorry for everything. I had to disappear. I had to protect her. There were people after me, after us. The crash was no accident." Peter clutched the letter to his chest. The crash. No accident. The world tilted. Suddenly, headlights blazed through the window. A truck pulled into the yard, tires skidding on gravel. Carl. Peter ducked, heart pounding. Then he heard the slam of a door, and the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being loaded. Peter froze behind the stack of tires, the letter still gripped in his hand. His heart pounded so loud, he feared Carl might hear it from across the garage. The sharp click of the shotgun echoed through the space, followed by Carl's voice, low and cold. "I know someone's in here," he growled. "Saw the car out front." Peter crouched lower, barely breathing. He reached slowly into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone, thumbing the emergency contact button. No service. Of course. Too far from the main road. Carl's heavy boots creaked across the concrete, moving methodically like a predator circling prey. Peter's mind raced. He couldn't run, not without exposing himself. And he couldn't fight, not with Carl armed and furious. He looked down at the letter again. The crash was no accident. His brother had been targeted, murdered, and this man had been living in the aftermath, profiting from it, using Marta. A board creaked near the back. Peter turned silently, crawling along the wall toward the small side door he'd used to enter. The moonlight outside glimmered through the cracked wood. He pushed it open slowly. It groaned, just slightly. Too loud. Carl spun toward the sound. "Hey!" Peter burst into a sprint, diving through the door and crashing into the gravel outside. The shotgun blast ripped through the night behind him, striking the frame just inches from his head. He didn't stop. He raced down the path, weaving through trees until he reached his car. He jumped in, locked the doors, and peeled away, dirt spraying behind the tires. Only when the garage lights disappeared in the distance did he allow himself to breathe. He drove straight back to the motel and locked the door behind him, hand still trembling as he laid the letter down on the desk. He reread it by lamplight. Daniel had been in hiding. He'd faked his identity, erased his past. And Carl had found him. Maybe even been responsible for the fire that killed him. Peter knew then he had to go to the police, but not just yet. He had to protect Marta first. At sunrise, Peter knocked on Angela's door. Marta sat at the small table inside the room, her feet curled under her. She looked up, eyes hopeful. Peter crouched beside her. "We're leaving, okay? Somewhere safe." Marta nodded. "Are we running?" Peter smiled softly. "No, we're protecting you." Angela gathered their things quickly. They left the motel and drove out of town, past dry plains and twisted oaks, toward the city where Peter's world, the world of billionaires, boardrooms, and power, could finally be used for something real, for justice, for Marta. But far behind them, In the garage, Carl stood in the ruins of his silence, and in his hand was Daniel's journal, the one Peter hadn't found. And inside that journal, scrawled in the margins of the final page, were two words that made Carl's knuckles turn white. She knows. The safe house Peter chose was nestled in the hills just outside Phoenix, a discreet estate owned under one of his holding companies, used occasionally for retreats and high-security meetings. Now it served a far greater purpose: shelter. Angela unpacked groceries in the kitchen, while Peter knelt by Marta's side in the living room, showing her old photo albums, pictures of Daniel from their childhood, their teenage years, holidays long before tragedy reshaped their family. Marta stared in awe at the images, as though trying to reconcile the man she'd known with the one in these pages. "He used to laugh like that?" she asked, pointing at a photo of Daniel with cake on his nose. Peter nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "All the time. He was the loudest in the room, always getting into trouble, always pulling pranks. He once switched the tires on my bicycle just to see if I'd notice." Marta giggled, her fingers tracing the faces on the glossy paper. "He never talked about any of this." Peter hesitated. "He was protecting you. He had enemies, Marta. I think that crash wasn't an accident. And I think your dad knew they were still out there." Marta's smile faded. "Carl?" Peter's expression darkened. "I believe so. And I think Carl may have done something to your dad." Angela stepped in quietly. "The question is why? What did Daniel know that was worth killing for?" Peter tapped the letter. "There's more. Daniel left me clues. I think he knew something, maybe even about someone inside my company. He was close to a project before he died, something that went wrong." Angela's brow furrowed. "You think this is bigger than Carl?" Peter nodded slowly. "Yes." And Marta's caught in the middle. Marta's eyes didn't leave the photo. "I want to know who did it," she said, voice trembling but fierce. "I want to know why they hurt him." Peter looked at her, heart swelling with pride and pain. "You will. I promise." That night, Peter made calls. Lawyers, private investigators, people he trusted. He put surveillance on Carl, ordered a forensic team to revisit the fire that killed Daniel, and requested access to sealed files from the crash investigation 10 years ago. Angela paced the hallway. "If you're right about this, Marta's not just a child in danger, she's a witness," Peter nodded. "And maybe more. If Daniel left behind documents, proof—" Meanwhile, Marta sat alone in the guest room, flipping through the journal Peter had managed to salvage. She couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were a hurricane. She reached the last page, blank except for a single pressed flower taped to the corner. Lavender. Under it, in faded ink, were 3 lines. "If they find me, tell her the truth. Tell her I loved her enough to disappear. And if she ever doubts who she is, show her the ring." Marta touched the necklace at her chest. The ring still hung there. But now it felt heavier. Outside, in the shadows of the trees near the estate, a dark figure crouched, watching the lights inside. Carl had found them. Carl crouched among the trees, cloaked by night, binoculars pressed to his eyes. The estate was lit in soft amber glow with movement behind the curtains. Marta, Peter, Angela. All of them under one roof, protected. His lips curled into a sneer. He'd underestimated Peter, thought the billionaire would faint and flee like some pampered idiot. But Peter had dug, uncovered too much. And now Marta, the girl he'd spent 2 years trying to keep quiet, was starting to remember. He couldn't let that happen. Pulling back from the binoculars, Carl dialed a number on his burner phone. One ring, then another. "Yeah?" said a rough voice on the other end. "They've moved. Phoenix Hills. I have eyes on the girl." A pause. Then, "Leave it. We told you. No more blood." Carl's voice dropped into a snarl. "She's starting to ask questions. The uncle won't hold up in court. If they dig into Rivera's past, into the deal—" "I said no," the voice snapped. "You clean up quietly. If this goes public, we all go down. You know what he left behind." Carl's fingers gripped the phone tight. Then you better pray I get to that journal before they do. He hung up, rage simmering beneath his skin. He knew Daniel had hidden more: documents, files, evidence of the deal they'd all been involved in years ago. He hadn't expected Peter to resurface, and certainly not this girl to carry Daniel's stubborn streak. He turned and disappeared into the woods, slipping into the shadows once more. Inside the estate, Peter stood by the large windows, sensing something just beyond the trees. He couldn't see anyone, but a deep chill had settled into his bones. Angela joined him, holding 2 mugs of tea. "They're scared, Peter. We're all on edge." He nodded. "He's out there. I can feel it." Angela handed him a mug. "Then let's get ahead of him." Peter sat at the kitchen island, spreading out documents and notes from the journal. Angela sat across, and Marta curled up in an armchair nearby, listening quietly. They focused on the name that kept appearing in Daniel's writing, Crescent Point. Peter had assumed it was a place, maybe an old safe house or business name, but Angela spotted something. "Here," she pointed at an old invoice. Crescent Point wasn't a place. It was a code name for a product, a prototype engine Daniel was working on for Lancaster Motors. Peter frowned. That project was buried after the accident. "Maybe not," Angela said. "What if Daniel found out it was being sold off, illegally?" Peter's eyes widened. "Stolen tech. That would explain why he went underground. If he threatened to expose them..." Angela finished his thought. "They'd have motive to silence him." Peter stood, determination burning in his eyes. "Then we expose them first." But just as he reached for his phone, the power flickered. And then, all at once, the estate went dark. The lights died with a sharp, hollow click, plunging the estate into silence. A second later, the security system let out a low warning beep, then stopped. Marta gasped and clutched the ring at her chest, eyes darting toward the windows. Peter grabbed a flashlight from the emergency drawer and switched it on, casting a narrow beam across the kitchen. Angela reached for her phone, but there was no signal. "We have a backup generator," Peter whispered, moving toward the hallway. "Basement. Stay here. Lock the doors behind me." Angela nodded and pulled Marta close as Peter disappeared down the staircase. In the basement, the air was cool and musty. Peter found the generator box, flipped the main switch. Nothing. He crouched, opened the casing. Wires had been cut. Deliberate. He stood quickly, heart racing, and pulled out his phone. Still no signal. Back upstairs, Marta sat in the corner of the living room, flashlight tucked in her lap. Angela was watching the front windows with quiet intensity. Then from outside, the sound of footsteps on gravel. Angela moved to the door, peeking through the side glass. A figure stepped into view, broad, slow-moving, deliberate. Carl. Angela locked the deadbolt and whispered, "Peter." He was already racing back up the stairs, flashlight bobbing wildly. When he reached the top, he looked at Angela. "Carl's outside," she said. Peter cursed under his breath. "He cut the power. He's trying to rattle us." Angela moved to Marta, placing a protective arm around her. "He's more than rattling, he's hunting." Peter scanned the room. "We can't wait for help. I need to get Marta out the back. There's a path through the trees, leads to the old hiking trail. If we reach the road, we can flag a car or get a signal." Angela nodded. "Go. I'll hold him off if he gets inside." Peter paused. "Angela." "Go." He turned to Marta. "Stay close to me, okay? No matter what." She nodded bravely, gripping his hand. They slipped through the back hallway, avoiding windows, Peter's flashlight the only light guiding their path. Outside, the night air was thick with tension. Crickets chirped mindlessly, unaware of the terror unfurling beneath the trees. Peter led Marta down the path, the flashlight bouncing off tree trunks and underbrush. They moved fast, hearts thudding. Then, from somewhere behind them, a twig snapped. Peter spun around. Another snap, too close. "Marta," he whispered. "Run!" They broke into a sprint, crashing through the brush. Marta stumbled but didn't fall, her bare feet scraping against rough roots. Behind them, a shadow lunged from the dark. Carl. Peter turned and shoved Marta behind a tree. He stepped forward just as Carl emerged, shotgun in hand, face twisted in rage. "You should have stayed in your world, Lancaster." Peter stood his ground. "Let her go, Carl. She's not yours." Carl raised the barrel. Peter didn't flinch. And then a shot rang out. But not from Carl. Carl staggered back, eyes wide in shock, the shotgun tumbling from his hands and landing in the dirt with a heavy thud. He clutched his shoulder, blood blooming across his shirt. Behind him, standing firm beneath the moonlight, was Angela, hands steady around the small pistol she'd pulled from the estate's emergency lockbox. "I told you to leave them alone," she said coldly. Carl turned toward her, fury etched in every line of his face. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," she snapped. "You took Daniel from us. You thought no one would find out, but she's his daughter, and we're not letting you take her too." Peter rushed forward, kicked the shotgun further away, and pressed Carl down to the ground with his knee. Marta stood frozen, eyes wide, heart pounding in her ears. Angela approached slowly, keeping the gun trained on Carl as Peter searched his pockets and pulled out the journal, the second one, the one Peter had missed. He flipped through it quickly, heart racing. Inside were names, dates, schematics, copies of files. Proof that Crescent Point hadn't just been buried, it had been sold, stolen, and Daniel had known exactly who was behind it. Peter's voice shook with a mix of rage and triumph. "This is it. Everything we need." Carl spat on the ground. "You think you'll win? Those people, those men, they don't go down easy." Peter stood towering over him. "Then they'll fall hard." Angela pulled out her phone and found the emergency line finally blinking with a single bar of signal. She called it in. Gunshot wound, attempted kidnapping, a confession waiting on paper. Within minutes, flashing lights lit up the woods. Police cars swarmed in. EMTs loaded Carl into the back of an ambulance, cuffed and groaning. Officers took statements. Peter handed over the journal, the letter, and every piece of evidence they'd gathered. Marta sat on the back of a cruiser, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the necklace that now seemed to hum with truth. Peter crouched beside her, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're safe now. I swear to you, this is over." She looked at him. "Is it?" He paused, then offered a soft smile. "For now. But there's more to fix. People need to pay. And I want you with me when it happens." She nodded. "He said I'd change things one day." Peter blinked. "He told you that?" She touched the ring. "In a dream, after he died." He swallowed hard. Then he was right. The next day, news broke across every major outlet. Lancaster Motors Whistleblower's Journal uncovers corporate corruption. An investigation was launched. Arrests followed. But for Peter, Angela, and Marta, justice wasn't just about headlines. It was about healing. And in the quiet hours before dawn, in a small garden behind the estate, Marta placed her father's photo between two lavender flowers. She looked up at Peter. "Can I call you Uncle now?" Peter smiled, eyes misting. "You can call me whatever you want." She leaned into his side, resting her head on his shoulder, but as they sat there beneath the waking sky, neither of them noticed the unmarked envelope slipped under the estate's gate. Inside, it was a photo of Daniel, alive. Taken just 2 years ago. The photo was grainy, slightly faded, as if taken from a distance or through a window. But there was no mistaking the man in it. Daniel. Same intense eyes, same half-smile, a few more lines on his face, and a thick beard, but unmistakably him. Peter stared at the image in disbelief, his hand trembling as he held it under the morning sun. It had been slipped under the estate gate in the early hours, tucked in a plain envelope with no note, no sender, just that single photograph. Daniel, alive, standing beside a small house in what looked like a mountain village. Snow capped the roofs in the background, trees towered beyond him. Marta stood at Peter's side, her gaze fixed on the image. "Is it real?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Peter knelt beside her, heart pounding. "I think so." Angela came outside, her coffee forgotten in her hands as she saw their faces. She looked down at the photo and her breath caught in her throat. Where was this taken? Peter turned it over. One word was scribbled on the back. Kopje. Angela blinked. That's in northern Montana, a mining town, almost deserted. Peter's mind raced. If he's alive, why hasn't he come back? Angela shook her head. Because someone tried to kill him, Peter. Maybe he thought they'd come after Marta again if he showed himself. Marta clutched the ring at her chest, her fingers white with pressure. We have to go. Peter looked at her, his heart twisting. Marta. I need to know, she said. Please, if he's really out there, if he's alive. Peter didn't argue. He couldn't. He understood that ache, that hunger for truth. Angela placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we go, but carefully. They packed within hours. Peter made discreet arrangements. Private jet, no paper trail, a rented SUV waiting in Helena. By dusk, they were on the road, winding through the icy hills of Montana, the landscape growing more isolated with each passing mile. Kopje was barely a town anymore, just a scattering of old cabins, a shuttered gas station, and one small inn still clinging to life. The temperature dropped fast as the sun disappeared behind the peaks. They checked in under fake names, keeping low. That night, Peter pulled out the photo again and stared at Daniel's face for hours. He couldn't sleep. The next morning, they drove to the spot that most resembled the background of the photo, an old miner's cabin nestled deep in the trees. The GPS cut out halfway up the dirt road, but Peter pushed forward, nerves tightening with every bump and jolt. Then, they saw it, the cabin from the photo. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. Peter stopped the car. Marta's voice trembled. What if he doesn't want to see me? Peter turned to her. Then we show him he's not alone anymore. They stepped out into the snow. Each step toward the cabin felt like walking through a dream. The closer they got, the heavier the silence became. Peter raised his hand and knocked, once, twice. Then the door creaked open, and a man stood there, eyes wide, face pale, and he whispered only one word, Marta? Marta couldn't breathe. The man standing before her was thinner, his beard streaked with grey, eyes sunken from years of solitude. But she knew. In her bones, in her blood, she knew. Daddy, she whispered. Daniel's knees buckled. He gripped the edge of the doorframe to steady himself, his eyes never leaving her. It can't be. Peter stepped forward, placing a steady hand on Marta's shoulder. It's her, Daniel. She's alive. She's safe. Daniel's eyes flicked to Peter, confusion flashing across his face. Peter? His voice cracked, disbelief woven into every syllable. I found her, Peter said softly. Carl had her, at the garage. But she's okay now. We brought her here. Daniel's face crumbled. He reached out with trembling hands, and Marta stepped into his arms without hesitation. She buried her face in his chest, tears soaking through his flannel shirt. He wrapped himself around her like a man holding light after years in darkness. I thought, he choked, I thought you were gone. After the fire, I couldn't go back. They were watching. I had to make them think we both died. Peter's jaw clenched. Carl knew. He took her. Daniel stiffened. He what? Peter nodded. He raised her like a tool, made her work in that garage, threatened her, lied about everything. Daniel's arms tightened around Marta protectively. I should have never trusted him. I left her with him for a week while I went to find a safe place. When I came back, the garage was in flames, and he told everyone we were dead. I couldn't prove anything. They would have hunted her. Angela stepped forward from the snowpath, eyes shimmering with tears. You should have told us. We would have protected her. I didn't know who to trust, Daniel said, his voice hollow. There was a file, proof of what they were doing at Lancaster, the engine project, the cover-up. People were dying in testing. I told Carl. He said he'd help expose it. I didn't know he was already bought. Peter's hands curled into fists. He tried to kill me too, but we have your journal now, both of them. Daniel blinked. Both? Peter nodded. He kept the second one. But we got it. It has everything. Daniel's eyes flared with hope. Then we can bring them down. Peter stepped closer. We already started. Arrests are happening. You need to come back. Testify. Daniel's face darkened. If I show my face now, they'll know I survived. They'll come harder. Not just at me, at her. Marta looked up at him. I'm not afraid. He touched her face gently, as if afraid she might vanish. You're just a child. I was a child fixing cars barefoot, she said. Now I know who I am, and I want to stand beside you. Daniel looked from her to Peter and Angela, his family. He nodded slowly. Okay, he whispered. Then we do it together. But none of them saw the figure watching from the tree line. This time it wasn't Carl. It was someone worse. Someone who knew Daniel hadn't died and had come to finish what they started. They stayed the night in the cabin, locking the doors and keeping the fire low. Daniel cooked with trembling hands, the act of preparing a simple stew oddly grounding. Marta sat beside him, never more than an arm's reach away. She followed his movements like they were sacred, memorizing how he stirred, how he added just a pinch more salt, like it was muscle memory. Like this, he wasn't a ghost. He was a father. Peter and Angela took turns keeping watch by the window. They knew it wouldn't take long. Whoever had sent that photo knew what it meant. Someone wanted them to find Daniel, but also to warn them, we're watching. Peter sat at the table speaking quietly. We go back tomorrow. I'll arrange a secure convoy, press involvement, maybe even law enforcement protection. Once we're public, they can't touch us. Daniel shook his head. They'll try. The people behind Crescent Point aren't just investors. They're connected, deep. You take out Carl, you shake the tree. But if we expose the core, the file I had, everything collapses. Angela leaned in. Is the file still out there? Daniel nodded. Encrypted, stored in 3 locations. One I left behind in Arizona, one's here. The third, it's with someone I haven't spoken to in a decade. Who? Peter asked. Daniel paused. My wife. Peter blinked. You were married? Daniel gave a sad smile. After I disappeared, I met someone. I didn't use my real name. I thought maybe I could start over. But she was smart. She figured it out, helped me hide, helped me raise Marta, until Carl stepped in. Angela crossed her arms. Where is she now? Daniel looked down. We separated after the fire. I told her to vanish. She took 1 copy of the Crescent file with her. I haven't seen her since. Peter stood. We'll find her. If we have all 3 copies, they won't be able to bury it. But Daniel's eyes flicked to the window. We may not have that much time. Outside, the night was too quiet. No wind, no animal sounds. Then, a metallic snap, a branch under a boot. Peter grabbed the pistol from the drawer. Angela moved to Marta, shielding her with her body. Daniel stood and said softly, Get her to the cellar, now. Peter flung open the trapdoor beneath the kitchen rug, revealing a narrow staircase into the old root cellar. Angela guided Marta down. Peter followed, weapon drawn. Daniel turned toward the door, heart thudding. 3 knocks, then silence. He opened it slowly. No one, just the snow, freshly fallen, until a whisper reached his ears. Time's up, Lancaster. A bullet tore through the wood beside his head. He dove for cover. Upstairs exploded into chaos. Glass shattered. A smoke grenade rolled in. From the cellar, Peter could barely see, but heard every sound. Marta screamed, Daniel shouted, and a masked figure descended the stairs. The masked figure moved like a shadow, silent, precise, merciless. Black tactical gear, matte finish. Not Carl. This was someone else. Someone trained. Peter raised the pistol and fired. The figure dodged effortlessly, deflecting with a sweep of their arm, and disappeared back up the stairs like smoke. Peter raced after them, shoving open the trapdoor just as another shot rang out through the cabin. Angela stood against the kitchen wall, gun raised, breath heaving. Smoke curled around her. Daniel was bleeding, a graze along his shoulder, but he was still standing, teeth clenched. "They're trying to drive us out," he growled. Peter helped him to his feet. "This isn't a scare tactic. They're here to kill." Marta climbed out of the cellar, her cheeks streaked with ash and tears, but she stood tall. "We have to go." Daniel looked at her, pride flaring despite the chaos. "There's a second exit, through the storage room." They moved fast. Angela led the way through the narrow back hall while Peter covered the rear. The cabin creaked as more footsteps approached outside. Whoever was after them wasn't alone. Through the storage room and out into the trees, they ran, 4 figures slipping into the deep snowdrifts beyond the cabin, breath clouding in the freezing air. Behind them, the cabin burst into flames. They didn't stop. Daniel led them to an old ATV buried beneath a tarp. "Used it last summer to get supplies," he said, throwing the tarp aside. "Still works." Peter helped Marta onto the back as Daniel climbed into the driver's seat. Angela straddled the back with her gun drawn. Peter stayed behind, covering their escape, heart thundering. As the engine roared to life, a second masked figure stepped from the trees. They locked eyes. No words, just motion. Peter fired once. Missed. The figure aimed. Peter dove. A bullet grazed his side. Then the ATV launched forward, barreling through the woods. Angela reached back, pulling Peter up as they passed. He grunted, clutching his ribs, blood staining his coat. Behind them, the fire grew higher. The figures didn't follow. Not yet. 10 minutes later, they reached the ridge. A ranger tower loomed ahead, long abandoned but still sturdy. Daniel pulled the ATV inside, barricading the doors. Marta rushed to Peter, tears in her eyes. "Are you okay?" He winced, smiling through the pain. "Just a scratch. I've had worse in meetings." Angela worked quickly to bandage the wound. Daniel stood at the window, watching the burning glow on the horizon. "They know we're alive. They know we have the files." Peter looked up. "Then we hit first." Daniel met his eyes. "We go public." Angela nodded. "We send everything. The journals, the names, the photos. We leak it all." Peter tapped his phone. "I've got a satellite modem in my bag. Give me 1 bar of signal and I'll bring the world down on them." Marta sat beside the fire, clutching the journal to her chest. She whispered, "Let them come." And miles away, in a glass tower in Los Angeles, a man in a suit placed a phone call. "They survived," he said. The voice on the other end replied coldly, "Then activate the final measure." The signal came through at 2:14 a.m. A weak, flickering connection bouncing off a private satellite Peter had long paid to maintain for emergency corporate negotiations in remote regions. Tonight, it would serve a higher purpose. Angela uploaded the first file, Daniel's journal scans, the schematics, the encrypted client list. Then came the second journal, the Crescent Point prototype data, followed by photos of Marta, the ring, and Daniel himself, proof that he'd survived and that someone had tried to erase him. Peter wrote the headline himself before sending it to 5 major outlets, encrypted through backdoor contacts in international media. Lancaster Motors whistleblower found alive. Secret files reveal corporate corruption, attempted murder. With one press of the send key, there was no going back. Across the country, inboxes pinged to life. Somewhere in New York, a journalist jolted awake. In Geneva, a corporate investigator began printing documents. In D.C., a senator called an emergency meeting. And in a dim office in Los Angeles, the man in the suit calmly opened a drawer and removed a small silver box. Inside was a phone with only 1 number saved. He tapped it once. At the ranger tower, dawn crept over the mountains. Daniel stood outside, snow crunching under his boots, eyes scanning the horizon. Marta sat beside Peter inside, warming her hands by the fire. "Do you think people will believe us?" Peter looked at her. "They won't have a choice." Angela walked in from the other room holding a laptop. "It's spreading, already trending. Hashtags, comments, whistleblower platforms are picking it up. Reddit's exploding." Daniel returned, face grim. "Then we need to move, before they send someone worse." Peter raised an eyebrow. "Worse than trained mercenaries?" Daniel hesitated. They call him the Auditor. He doesn't leave trails. He erases them. Angela went pale. He's real. Daniel nodded. And he's loyal to the board. If they've activated him, he's coming for all of us. Peter stood. Then we draw him out. Expose him too. Daniel reached into his pack and pulled out a final USB drive, one Peter hadn't seen. What's that? The kill switch, Daniel said. Every client name, every financial link, every code. If we upload this, it doesn't just expose the corruption, it proves it. They'll burn for real. Peter stared at it. Then let's light the match. Suddenly the laptop flickered, an intrusion warning. Angela cursed under her breath. We've been pinged. Someone found our IP. A red dot appeared on the screen, tracking, approaching, fast. Too late, Daniel muttered. He's already here. Peter grabbed Marta's hand. Into the trees, now. Angela stuffed the drives into her coat. We split. He can't follow all of us. The door creaked, then silence. No birds, no wind. And then, a single, quiet knock, followed by a man's voice, calm as ice. Hello, Daniel. You've been busy. The knock echoed through the cabin like a final bell. Everyone froze. Peter's hand gripped Marta's tightly, pulling her back toward the rear exit. Angela shoved the flash drives into her coat and backed toward the shadows. Daniel, however, didn't move. He knew the voice. He'd heard it once before over a phone call 10 years ago when he'd threatened to go public with what he knew. The voice hadn't yelled or threatened. It had simply stated with cold precision that silence was his only option if he wanted to keep breathing. That voice belonged to the Auditor. Daniel stepped toward the door slowly, heart pounding. Outside, the man waited. Dressed in grey slacks and a high-collared coat, he looked like a banker, not a killer. His hair was slicked back, not a strand out of place. His face was unreadable, calm, efficient. He held no weapon in view, but that made him even more dangerous. Daniel, he said again, as if greeting an old acquaintance, you weren't supposed to come back. Daniel didn't open the door. You weren't supposed to follow. The man tilted his head. Yet here we are. Inside, Angela pulled Peter and Marta to the side. We have to get those drives out, even if we don't make it. Those files need to reach the DOJ. Peter nodded. There's a ranger station 15 miles north, no roads, but Marta and I can make it. Angela looked at him. She's a child. She's the bravest one here. Marta met their eyes. I'm going. I know the trail. I hiked it with Dad years ago. Angela turned to Daniel. We're splitting. You stall him. Daniel didn't look back. Go. Now. Angela opened the back door. Snow blew in. Peter scooped Marta into his arms, then set her down and ran beside her into the trees. Angela followed, pulling her coat tightly. Back at the front of the cabin, Daniel unlocked the door and opened it slowly. The Auditor stepped inside. No gun. No threats, just silence. You were declared dead, the man said, taking off his gloves with surgical precision. That was inconvenient. Daniel said nothing. Your brother complicated things, he continued. Carl was a fool. I warned them not to involve him. Daniel studied him. You're not here for me. You're here for what I know. The Auditor nodded. The drives, the story, it's spreading, but not fast enough. If I get to them now, I can kill it. Daniel stepped into his path. You won't. The Auditor gave the faintest smile. You don't have to die, Daniel. You just have to disappear again. Daniel's eyes darkened. I did that once. Left my daughter. Let a monster raise her. I won't vanish again. The man sighed, disappointed. That's a shame. Then, quicker than a blink, he moved. Daniel blocked the first blow, ducked the second, but the third caught him hard across the jaw. He fell back, crashing into the table, and the Auditor reached for the USB drive on the desk. But it was gone. Daniel grinned through bloodied lips. You're too late. The Auditor froze, his hand hovering over the empty space where the USB drive had been. His calm expression didn't crack, but something sharp flickered in his eyes. "Where is it?" he asked, voice low. Daniel wiped the blood from his mouth, grinning through the pain. "Out of your reach." The auditor stepped forward slowly. "You've made a grave mistake." Daniel didn't move. The mistake was underestimating her. "Marta's not just a child. She's the reason I came back, and she'll be the reason all of this burns." The auditor tilted his head slightly. "So she has it." Daniel said nothing. Outside, the snow muffled all sound, except the soft crunch of footsteps, as Peter and Marta darted through the forest, breathless. Angela brought up the rear, scanning the trees constantly. "We're nearly halfway," Marta whispered. "The trail curves left near the ridge. There's a shortcut." Peter gritted his teeth against the freezing wind. "We'll take it. Just keep moving." Behind them, branches snapped. Angela stopped cold. "We're not alone." Peter spun around. The forest seemed empty, but his instincts screamed otherwise. Marta grabbed his hand. "This way," she said, veering off the trail. They plunged deeper into the woods. Back at the cabin, Daniel and the auditor circled one another. It wasn't a brawl, it was chess. Every move calculated, every breath counted. "You know what's coming," the auditor said. "That file will never make it out." Daniel laughed. "That's what you said 10 years ago. But I'm still here." A swift punch came without warning. Daniel ducked, swept low, and drove his shoulder into the auditor's chest, knocking him back into a chair. The impact sent a lamp crashing to the floor, glass shattering. The auditor rose calmly, brushing off his coat. "I admire your spirit." He lunged again, this time drawing a blade. Daniel barely sidestepped the swipe, the tip grazing his ribs. "You really think this will end with a knife?" Daniel snarled. "You're too late." Suddenly a sound from outside, tires screeching on ice, a car. The auditor turned his head for the briefest second. Daniel seized the moment. He lunged forward, knocking the blade from his hand and driving him into the wall. The two men grappled, fists flying, old fury finally exploding in the open. Then the cabin door burst open, and a woman stepped in, dark hair pulled back, coat dusted in snow, eyes fierce with fire. "Get away from him," she said, aiming a shotgun directly at the auditor. Daniel blinked. "Eva?" The auditor froze. "I should have pulled the trigger 10 years ago," Eva said coldly. Daniel's wife, Marta's mother, was alive, and she had come back to finish what they started. Eva's hands didn't tremble. Her grip on the shotgun was steady, eyes locked on the auditor like a predator reuniting with the prey that once slipped through her teeth. Her voice was low, calm, and terrifying. "Step away from him," she said again. The auditor, for the first time, hesitated. His mind calculated the risk. 2 targets, 1 armed, no backup, and the kill mission already compromised. Daniel, bleeding but still standing, looked at her with a mix of disbelief and something deeper, regret. "You're alive," he breathed. She didn't take her eyes off the auditor. "You left us, I had to be. I thought you—" "Save it," she cut in, her voice softening only slightly. "We'll talk later. After this one's gone." The auditor raised his hands slowly. "Eva, you don't want to do this." "I do," she said. "For Daniel. For Marta." His lips curled into a faint smile. "Marta. So she's the one carrying the drive. That's unfortunate." Eva cocked the shotgun. "You won't touch her." He looked between them, calculating. Then slowly he stepped back, eyes never leaving Daniel's. "You've bought time," he said. "Nothing more." Then he vanished into the snow, slipping into the tree line like a ghost. Eva held her stance a moment longer, then exhaled and lowered the weapon. "He'll be back." Daniel staggered forward, grabbing her hand. "You saved my life, again." She turned to him, her expression flickering with old emotion. "You broke my heart, but you're still her father. And this fight, it's not just yours anymore." Miles away, Marta led Peter and Angela up the final ridge. Wind howled against their faces, the snow biting into their skin, but the ranger tower was now visible through the trees, metal, stark against the grey sky. "We made it," Marta gasped. Peter collapsed to his knees. "Let's hope the radio works." Inside the tower, Peter flicked on the generator. An old crank system groaned to life. Angela began setting up the satellite link, slipping the final USB drive into the laptop. Marta stood at the window scanning the woods. "Someone's coming," she said. Peter joined her. At first, nothing. Then movement. 2 figures, Daniel and Eva. Angela's face softened with shock. "Eva?" Marta raced down the tower stairs, slipping on the last few steps. Daniel caught her in his arms, clutching her close. "I told you to be safe." "I am," she said, tears brimming. "You're here." Eva knelt beside them. "You've grown into your fire, little one." Peter helped them into the tower. "The files are uploading. We're broadcasting everything," Angela added. "Names, deals, corruption, even the internal memos." Daniel pulled a final folder from his coat. "This seals it, the auditor's contract signed by Lancaster board members. No denying it now." The laptop pinged. "Upload complete." Angela looked up. "It's done. The world knows." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Marta whispered, "What happens now?" Eva answered, voice steady, "Now we survive the storm." And from the trees below, something stirred. A drone, watching, streaming, recording every word. The drone hovered in eerie silence just outside the tower's window, its lens fixed directly on Marta, a cold mechanical eye watching, recording, transmitting. Peter lunged for the shotgun and aimed, but Daniel grabbed his arm. "Wait!" Peter hissed. "Why? It's broadcasting everything." Daniel shook his head. "That's exactly why we don't shoot it." Angela joined them, eyes narrowed. "Let them see, let them hear. The more they try to silence us, the louder this becomes." Eva stepped beside Marta, pulling her close. "Smile for them, sweetheart." Marta looked up, unsure. Eva whispered, "Let them know you're not afraid." So Marta did. She stepped forward, chin high, shoulders back. She looked directly into the lens and said calmly, "My name is Marta Rivera Lancaster. I'm 8 years old, and I'm not running anymore." The drone beeped, shifted slightly in the air, then zipped off into the sky like a released secret. Silence fell in its wake. Peter sat down heavily. "It's gone global now. They'll spin it, try to discredit us. But the truth is, out there. We've crossed the line." Daniel pulled the final chair to the center of the room and sat, wiping his brow. "We've drawn blood. Now they'll try to cut deep." Angela pulled up her laptop screen. Social media was flooding with hashtags. Was Lancaster truth? Machis Marta speaks. Whistlefire. Live comments poured in. "The girl is a hero. Lancaster Motors lied to us." "Who is the man in the drone footage? Where's the DOJ?" Eva paced, always watching the tree line. "We can't stay here long. They'll send another team." Peter nodded. "I've arranged extraction. 2 helicopters, 1 decoy, 1 reel. ETA, 90 minutes. Angela stared at the radar feed. "Unless they jam us." As if summoned, the radar blinked red. Jamming signal detected. Peter cursed. "They're close. Too close." Daniel reached for the folder again. "We leak 1 more piece. Coordinates to the hard drives, real names, a backup list." Angela hesitated. "Once that goes out, there's no reversing this." Peter looked at Marta. "Are you ready?" She nodded. Daniel uploaded the file. The progress bar crawled. 40%, 52%, 71%. Then, blackout. The screen cut to static. The tower's lights flickered out. A warning alarm buzzed from the emergency generator. Peter yanked the curtain aside and looked down the hill. Black SUVs, headlights off, rolled silently toward the base of the ridge. Eva cocked her shotgun. "They're not here to talk." Angela chambered a round in her pistol. "We hold the line." Daniel looked at Marta, his eyes glassy. "If I don't make it," he began. She shook her head fiercely. "No, No more goodbyes. He pulled her into his arms. Then they turned to the door side by side. As the first SUV doors opened, dark figures poured out. And behind them, calmly walking up the hill, was the auditor. This time, he wasn't alone. The figures fanned out with military precision, dark silhouettes against the pale snow, each one armed, masked, and silent. A dozen at least. Flanking the auditor were two others in sleek suits, holding briefcases instead of weapons. They weren't mercenaries. They were from the board. Angela's voice dropped to a whisper. They've come to wipe it clean, everyone, everything. Peter glanced at the dead laptop, then to Marta. We need to split, create confusion. One of us gets that last file out. Eva slung a backpack over Marta's shoulders, stuffing the final USB inside. You go with Peter, through the ravine. I'll draw them to the tower. No, Marta cried. I'm staying. Daniel knelt in front of her, holding her face. You're the reason we're still breathing. You're the proof they can't silence. We've survived this long because of your strength, but now we need your voice out there. Peter pulled Marta to her feet, wrapping his coat tighter around her. We run fast, no stopping. Angela turned to Daniel and Eva. You sure? Daniel nodded. We'll buy you the time. Peter and Marta slipped out the back, just as a flash grenade hit the front door. Boom! The tower shook. Smoke filled the main room. Daniel and Eva moved like a unit, laying down cover fire from the windows. The armed men scattered, returning fire. Bullets tore through wood and shattered glass. Angela dropped behind a support beam, taking out one of the suit-clad figures with a single, precise shot. Outside, the auditor walked calmly toward the tower, unfazed by the chaos. He signaled two of his men to break formation. Find the girl. Bring me the drive. Meanwhile, Peter and Marta reached the ridge's edge. Below, the ravine dropped into a frozen stream that fed into a wider trail. If they made it to the other side, there was a ranger outpost where a working radio might be found. We jump, Peter said. Marta looked down. That's a big jump. Peter looked back. Gunfire echoed from above. No time to be scared. They leapt. The snow cushioned the fall, barely. Peter groaned as his leg twisted under him, but he stood quickly, grabbing Marta's hand again. They ran. Back at the tower, Eva took a shot to the shoulder and went down, grimacing. Daniel pulled her behind a cabinet, reloading. You okay? She smirked through the pain. Don't get soft on me now. Angela threw down her last smoke grenade. Time to go. They'll breach in 60 seconds. Daniel glanced once more at the stairs. We hold the top. They ran. Outside, the auditor stood at the base of the hill, untouched. He tapped his earpiece. Did you find her? His man answered, Negative. She's gone. The auditor's jaw flexed. And then a new voice echoed from a satellite feed he hadn't expected. A broadcast, intercepted. Marta's voice, clear and steady. My name is Marta Rivera Lancaster. My father tried to warn you. You didn't listen. But I'm here now, and I have everything. Across the world, millions began to listen, and the auditor, for the first time, looked afraid. The broadcast spread like wildfire. Across televisions, phones, office screens, and courtroom monitors, Marta's voice rang out. A trembling but fierce declaration of truth that couldn't be muted. My father, Daniel Lancaster, was framed, silenced. For 10 years they called him dead. But he's alive, and I am his witness. His proof. Her face appeared next, small, defiant, framed in snow and shadow. Her eyes, mirrors of Daniel's, stared into the hearts of millions. Peter kept her close as they dashed through the thinning forest, snow giving way to frozen soil. The ranger station was less than a mile away now. Every step Marta took was heavy with purpose, with legacy. Back at the tower, chaos raged. Daniel and Angela defended the upper floor like lions protecting cubs. The assault team breached below, but smoke and fire turned the stairs into a war zone. Eva, her arm bleeding, clutched a radio stolen off one of the intruders. They're trying to jam the signal again, but it's too late, it's already gone viral. Angela nodded grimly. Let them come. All they can do now is watch themselves fall. From the forest below, Peter stopped and pulled Marta behind a rock outcrop. The ranger station was in sight, a squat wooden building beside a long abandoned fire trail. Smoke drifted from its chimney. Someone was there. Peter narrowed his eyes. That wasn't part of the plan. Marta stayed low. Could it be someone from the team? Peter shook his head. No, too soon. Footsteps behind. Peter spun, gun raised. A figure stepped out from the trees, hands in the air, not armed. Daniel, breathing hard, coated in ash. One side of his face scraped, bruised. Had to make sure you got here, he panted. Peter lowered his weapon. You left the tower. Daniel glanced back. Angela stayed. She said to finish it. Marta ran into his arms. We're so close, she said. Peter motioned forward. Let's go. They crept to the ranger station's door. Daniel reached out and knocked softly. Nothing. He tried again. The door opened a crack. An old man peeked through, white beard, ranger badge half torn from his coat. Storm's coming, he muttered. You folks lost? Peter held up the drive. We need to use your radio. Federal broadcast. Emergency clearance. The man's eyes narrowed. You those Lancaster people? Daniel stiffened. Yes. The ranger opened the door fully. Then get in. You just put the whole damn world on fire. They stepped inside. Peter rushed to the radio terminal while Daniel locked the door and moved furniture in front. Marta handed the drive to the ranger. This has everything. The old man nodded, surprisingly calm. I've seen a few wars in my time. This one's digital, but truth's always worth bleeding for. He sat, plugged in the drive, and hit transmit. The screen lit up. Uploading. Outside, black SUVs tore down the fire trail, sirens off, tires kicking up dust and snow. Peter looked out the window. They found us. Inside, the percentage climbed. 12%, 27%, 44%. And the last chapter of the Lancaster betrayal prepared to erupt into daylight. The ranger station shook as the first SUV skidded to a stop outside. Doors flew open. Black-clad agents poured out, weapons drawn, forming a tight perimeter. The forest around them fell silent, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Inside, Peter bolted the door and turned to the ranger. How long to finish the upload? 4 minutes, the old man said, hands steady on the controls. That's if your luck holds. Daniel paced beside the window, his eyes locked on the incoming team. It won't. They'll breach in less than 2. Marta sat at the ranger's desk, watching the progress bar inch forward. 53%. 58%. She turned to her father. We can't lose this. You won't, Daniel said, crouching beside her. No matter what happens, you're not alone. Peter joined them, slipping a backup drive into Marta's coat pocket. If this goes down, you run. Through the back trail. Don't stop until you reach the next station. The ranger pointed toward a narrow exit at the rear. Leads to a service tunnel. It's tight, but it'll get her out. Marta's hands trembled slightly. I don't want to run again. Daniel placed his hand over hers. This time you're not running, you're delivering truth. Angela's voice suddenly crackled over Peter's satellite phone. I stalled them as long as I could, she said, breathless. They're jamming local comms now. You've got maybe 90 seconds. Peter gritted his teeth. We're at 68%. We need more time. Angela paused. Then her voice turned resolute. Then I'll give it to you. The line went dead. Outside, one of the agents lifted a battering ram. Daniel turned to the ranger. Any weapons? The old man slid open a drawer. 2 revolvers, a flare gun, and a hunting knife. Daniel handed one to Peter and kept the other for himself. The flare gun he gave to Marta. If they get in, fire this through the roof hatch. The whole ridge will see it. Marta nodded. 78%, 82%. The front window shattered as a flash grenade was tossed inside. Peter grabbed Marta and shielded her. Boom. White light. Deafening sound. Wood splintered. They surged through the breach, shouting commands, rifles raised. Daniel dove behind the ranger's desk, firing. Peter shot out a light, throwing shadows into the room. The ranger took a bullet to the shoulder, grunting but still seated, eyes on the upload. 91%. 93%. Marta crawled beneath the desk, gripping the flare gun. Then the auditor stepped through the smoke. Calm. Untouched. He raised his hand, and the agent stopped. His eyes landed on Marta. "You've come far, little one," he said. Daniel stood, gun raised. "You won't touch her." The auditor smiled. "I don't need to, I just need to unplug the drive." He stepped forward, and Marta raised the flare gun. She didn't blink. "Don't," she said. 97%. 98%. The auditor looked down the barrel, and then Marta fired. The flare burst into the ceiling, flames licking the rafters. The light engulfed the room, and the upload hit 100%. The flare sizzled as it embedded in the ceiling, casting a burning red glow over the room like a war beacon. Smoke thickened instantly, setting off the station's ancient alarms, shrieking into the chaos. The auditor flinched, just slightly, but it was enough. Daniel tackled him. They hit the ground hard, wrestling for the gun. Peter jumped in, helping disarm one of the agents who had turned toward Marta. The ranger, bleeding but conscious, slid the laptop off the desk and into Peter's hands. "Get her out!" he shouted. Peter grabbed Marta, who was coughing from the smoke but still standing, eyes wide with determination. "Back tunnel," Daniel yelled, wrestling with the auditor. "Go!" Marta looked back once, just once, as her father stared at her through the smoke. "Run," he said, his voice ragged but certain. "Live." Peter dragged her through the back exit into the narrow tunnel. The walls pressed close, barely wide enough for his shoulders, but he pushed forward, shielding her as best he could. Marta clutched the backup drive against her chest like a heartbeat. Above them, the ranger station burned, and the world outside began to tremble. 20 minutes later, in a rural sheriff's office miles from the ridge, an emergency transmission cut into every local broadcast. Marta's full video, combined with the files Peter had carried out, now lived on a dozen secure platforms, leaked by whistleblowers, protected by transparency networks. The entire Lancaster Motors conspiracy unraveled in real time. News anchors stammered. Officials resigned. An emergency DOJ task force convened within the hour. Arrest warrants were issued for multiple board members, corporate partners, and, most shockingly, 2 federal liaisons who had helped orchestrate the original Crescent Point cover-up. But Marta didn't hear any of that right away. She and Peter were taken into protective custody, driven down the mountain in an unmarked van, away from the flames and the gunfire. She sat quietly, her knees pulled to her chest, Peter's coat draped over her shoulders. He sat beside her, silent. Finally, she spoke. "Do you think he made it?" Peter looked out the window, jaw clenched. "I don't know." Marta nodded. Her eyes were glassy but dry. "If he didn't," she said, "then he gave me enough to finish what he started." Peter turned to her, something breaking in his chest. "You already did." Back at the ranger station, fire crews arrived too late to save the building. Only the stone foundation remained, smoldering in ash. Among the rubble, they found 3 bodies, 2 agents, and 1 man in a suit. But not Daniel. No sign of Daniel Lancaster. No sign of the auditor either. Just a scorched revolver and footprints leading away into the forest, one trail chasing the other. Eva's body was never recovered. Angela's voice, however, appeared on a podcast 2 days later, encrypted, anonymous, defiant. "We told the truth. They tried to erase it. But they forgot one thing. Stories like this don't die. They survive in people, in girls like Marta, who now had the world's attention." 2 weeks later, the world had changed. Marta Rivera Lancaster stood on the steps of the Capitol building, a small podium raised so she could reach the microphones. A sea of reporters crowded the plaza, their cameras rolling, their pens poised, but for once, silent. Behind Marta stood Peter, hands clasped, face proud but solemn. To his left, the Attorney General. To his right, Angela, alive, healed, her arm in a sling, but her eyes sharper than ever. Marta took a breath, the wind catching her curls, and began. When I fixed cars barefoot behind a broken garage, I thought the world had forgotten about people like me. But my father taught me engines, and he taught me truth. He disappeared to protect me. Now I speak so no one else has to disappear. Flashbulbs exploded, but Marta didn't flinch. You've read the reports. You've seen the files. They buried Crescent Point. They killed to hide it, but they didn't bury all of us. She reached into her coat pocket and held up the silver ring. This belonged to Daniel Lancaster, my father, my hero, the man they couldn't kill. A hush fell deeper. He vanished 2 weeks ago during the fire at the ranger station. No body was found, no confirmation, just footprints. I believe he's still out there, watching, protecting, and I will live every day to honor what he gave up. Behind her, Angela wiped a tear. Marta continued, We've filed charges. The investigation is ongoing. More names will fall. But this isn't about revenge, it's about rebuilding. Because justice isn't just punishment, it's rebuilding trust. She leaned into the mic. I'm not here as a victim. I'm here as the beginning. Applause rose like thunder. That night, Marta sat alone on the rooftop of Peter's penthouse overlooking the city. Lights twinkled far below, and her speech played on a loop across every major network. Peter joined her, setting 2 mugs of hot cocoa between them. You made history, he said. Marta sipped quietly. Feels strange, being seen. Peter nodded. Truth has that effect. She looked up. Do you think he's really out there? Peter didn't answer right away. Then he pulled something from his coat pocket. A package wrapped in cloth stained with ash. This was dropped at a fire station outside Helena. No note, no prints. Marta unwrapped it. Inside was the missing journal. The original one. Her father's handwriting across the front page. And tucked between the pages, a lavender flower. Marta pressed it to her lips, eyes glistening. He's alive, she whispered. Peter smiled. I think he's waiting. Watching. Then, from the rooftop edge, something caught Marta's eye. Across the street, on a shadowed balcony, stood a man in a coat, his face hidden but his stance unmistakable. She stood slowly, walked to the edge. The man raised 2 fingers in a quiet salute, then turned and vanished into the night. Daniel Lancaster. Still fighting, still protecting, still hers. Months passed. The Lancaster Motors scandal became the largest corporate exposure case in modern American history. Executives were indicted, assets seized. The company was dismantled piece by piece until all that remained was a name forever tied to betrayal and redemption. But Marta's story outlived it all. She became a symbol, not just of courage, but of the power truth had when spoken by the smallest voice in the room. Documentaries were made. A scholarship was created in her name for girls in STEM. Her speech played in schools, in halls of justice, even in congressional hearings, as lawmakers drafted new whistleblower protections. Yet Marta herself stayed quiet in the spotlight. She chose not to do interviews, not to become a celebrity. She chose to live. With Peter, who legally adopted her, with Angela, who moved into the townhouse next door and cooked Sunday dinners like nothing had ever happened. With the ranger, the one who stayed behind despite his wounds, who taught Marta how to track stars and read wind patterns in the trees. Still, every night before bed, Marta read 1 page from her father's journals. And every morning, she looked out the window, half hoping, half knowing, that somewhere in the crowd, in the wind, Daniel was watching. Then one day, it happened. On a quiet morning in spring, a package arrived. No address, no stamp. Inside was a single Polaroid. Marta asleep on the rooftop patio, blanket draped over her, book on her chest. Someone had taken it from a distance. On the back, in faded pen, still watching, still proud. Love, Dad. She clutched the photo, breath catching in her throat. Peter found her minutes later, holding it close. He was here, she whispered. Peter read the message, then smiled. I told you, he's a shadow, and shadows always protect their own. That evening, Marta wrote something for herself, not to publish. Not to read aloud, just to know. She wrote, "He vanished so I could speak, he hid so I could be seen. They tried to erase him, but they only made me louder. I am the daughter of the disappeared. I carry his silence, and I turned it into thunder." She folded the note and placed it inside the final journal. Then she opened her window. The city buzzed below. Life pulsed all around. And somewhere far from the towers and lights, in a cabin rebuilt deep in the woods, in footprints left fresh by a creek, in shadows watching rooftops at midnight, Daniel Lancaster smiled. Because Marta was no longer just his daughter, she was his legacy, and she had saved them all.